So I'll introduce myself for anybody who doesn't know me. My name's Fliss Dewsbury. I'm the Deputy Head of Pen Green and I lead the Stronger Practice Hub. So hello.
Hello, I am Flavia and I'm one of the assistant heads here at Pen Green with responsibility for the nurseries. I've worked here for 20 years.
So we're talking today about how high quality interactions support aspects of pedagogy. So I hope everybody's in the right place. That's
this
helpful.
Is what you expect.
So we just thought, there we are, presentation. We just wondered if people could pop in the chat what you're hoping to gain from today's session. So what are your aspirations for the session? So if people wouldn't mind just popping those in, that would be great. Becky, if you're happy to shout things out, that would be brilliant. It's a beautiful picture.
Mm-hmm. Thinking about interactions with non-speaking children.
Thank you.
A few different possible ideas. Some nuggets of inspiration to feed back to staff teams. Doing some work with staff on high quality interactions. So any ideas to support our CPD? Fliss, you've got something about that later.
Yeah.
Oh, and Lucy can't hear us. That's a shame, Lucy.
Oh.
I'll try and sort that out in the background. Gain some insights into quality interactions to share with early years students to share in their placements.
Brilliant.
Love to share with staff in team meetings to help improve quality interactions.
Yeah.
Practical ideas which can support high quality interactions for children and staff with different communication styles. An understanding of how high quality interactions makes a difference.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll move on from there. Okay. Thank you. So we'll come back to some of those as we go through. So this is what we're hoping that we'll achieve in this session. So as a Stronger Practice Hub, our remit is to support with the evidence research that is out there. So Flavia and I have gone through a number of different research projects around high quality interactions and that we're going to share with you today and think about some of the strengths and some of the limitations of those. And part of that we'll be sharing is our own research around pedagogic strategies, which has been undertaken at Pen Green. But it's not exclusively that. There are other programmes as well for us to consider and some opportunities for you to think about them as well. So we're going to introduce the term evidence informed because I think that's a really good starting place. We want to consider the term pedagogy and reflect on how pedagogic strategies were developed within a practitioner-led research project. We're going to reflect on the term high quality interactions and explore the strengths and limitations surrounding the current evidence out there. And then to support yourselves to make an informed decision. I think there's so much information out there. The reason we've pulled all of this together in one place is to support you and your teams to be able to make an informed decision and to consider the research surrounding high quality interactions to support your context. Thank you, Becky. I knew you would be on that.
Thank you. So I'm just going to start by introducing, just a little bit about what evidence informed is when we talk about what we think in terms of research and how that backs our practice as well. So in evidence informed research uses the best available research, practitioner expertise and context specific data to guide decisions and practices. So I suppose as practitioners they are the choices that we make and what we want for our children, our families, our context, our community. And it's important that it is evidence informed. It is important that you have got research that backs that up. You've made those really important decisions and it's been backed up by research. So it's important to have, that knowledge to be able to make the right choice.
And we'll share several research projects with you today.
So then the next thing is pedagogy. So again, pedagogy, what it means, the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or theoretical concept. And Chris Athey as well describes it as the science and art of education, includes the deliberate planning of a learning environment, structured intervention in learning, and interpretation of children's learning behaviour. So again, it's about how do we teach children? How do we believe children learn? So our pedagogy, what we choose for our children, our families, our settings, it really much is about our values and beliefs about how children learn, how we want to teach them, and the role of the adult comes into it as well. So how do we believe the role of the adult is in our settings? How do we see the adult in terms of supporting children? So that will form part of your pedagogy, from your environment, your planning, your resources, your activities. So anything to do with how we are teaching children, it is your pedagogy. And again, it should be backed up by research and yeah.
And one of the things is that high quality interactions forms one aspect of our pedagogy, of our pedagogical
approach.
Yes, thank you. The reason for the Snoopy insert is that I think it was Chris Athey or Tina Bruce described, when they talk about pedagogy, they use this analogy. So if you haven't heard it, it's and if people aren't familiar with Charlie Brown and Snoopy, so this is Charlie Brown, Snoopy and Lucy, and the infamous Lucy walks over to Charlie Brown and asks Charlie Brown what he's doing, and Charlie Brown was leaning down towards Snoopy, and Lucy says, well, what are you doing, Charlie Brown? And he says, well, I'm teaching Snoopy to whistle. So Lucy approaches Snoopy and she leans down and she says, well, I can't hear him whistling. And Charlie Brown says, I said, I'm teaching him. It doesn't mean he's learning. And I think that helps in terms of thinking about what pedagogy is.
Absolutely.
It's about teaching and learning happening simultaneously.
Next is, ask yourself the question, how do children learn and develop? What is your role as the adult in supporting this? So if you want to just pop your thoughts in the chat, that'd be really helpful, just to kind of have some of your ideas around this.
As Flavia said, it's your kind of philosophical position. Your pedagogy is your philosophical position based on your values and beliefs.
Absolutely.
So again, Becky, would you mind just shouting some of them out for us?
Absolutely. Model behaviour.
Making you work in your lunch breaks.
Demonstrating new skills through connection. Oh, I've got lots now. Narrating as you go, spark curiosity. Children learn when they are motivated, when the learning is meaningful but levelled at the right step of challenge and interest for them, when they feel safe and secure in their relationships and environment. Making it fun.
Yeah.
Be a co-learner.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. I guess what we were really wanting to emphasise, and it's definitely come up through the chat, is that actually we're co-constructing knowledge alongside children. That for many of us, our belief is not that children are empty vessels to be filled, but actually how the child brings something and the adult brings something as well, as does the environment. And so I just wanted to make it really explicit the position that we come from, and some of the values and beliefs that we sit within organisationally. So for Pen Green, our position is one of a social constructivist pedagogical approach. So we believe that children are active participants in co-constructing knowledge alongside others. We emphasise that collaboration and that dialogue, as well as the context, and that we scaffold learning to support children as they go, which is, you know, the concept of Bruner. And we develop not only knowledge, but children's opportunities to think critically, to support their executive functioning. But for children to be able to be in that position, as somebody said, they've got to feel safe and secure. So their emotional well-being has got to be in a very solid position. So have that in the back of your mind as we go through these presentations. So we're wanting to just think about why are high quality interactions important. So again, we'd love you to use that QR code, and it will take you to a Mentimeter, which will just pick up what you've said in this process, and to just share with us why you feel high quality interactions are important. We know that they are important, but it's good for us to just think collectively as to why we feel they're important.
Absolutely.
So please go ahead and have a go. If you can't use the Mentimeter, please again use the chat. So we can see collaboration, language skills, development, brain development, relationships, vocabulary, respect, help the children learn, thinking. Engagement, I think, is, if it's bigger, Becky, it's yeah, that means
people put the same word, the bigger it gets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So engagement is obviously really prevalent in terms of why high quality interactions are important. So again, if we're going to define high quality interactions as part of our pedagogical approach, so we want to define it as high quality interactions refer to warm, responsive and developmentally appropriate exchanges that support children's learning, their emotional well-being, their communication and cognitive development. So that's kind of how we are positioning our understanding. And there's loads of different research that is out there that's offering their findings from different observational studies. And this is what we're going to talk through today. So we're going to share with you some longitudinal studies that have happened and think about the strengths and limitations of those, some observational studies, and again, the strengths and limitations of those. SHREC, which is an EEF project, which is out there, which is great, and some of the strengths and limitations around that. Thinking about the neuroscientific findings, we're not doing the strengths and limitations, but what some of the neuroscientific findings are, and share with you some links from some Ofsted research and reports as well. And then we're going to end by sharing with you a project that we've carried out here at Pen Green and how that has evolved over the years and where we are currently with that. So we're going to start with the longitudinal study of the EPI project and EPSI project. Now, I'm certain that many of you have heard of EPI and EPSI projects, and the links are in the slides for you to again use in your staff training and staff development. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the findings from EPI, so the main findings indicated the importance of sustained shared thinking, which I'm sure many of you have heard the term of. So sustained shared thinking is one of the most influential concepts that have emerged from the EPI study. And it's defined as an episode in which two or more individuals work together in an intellectual way to solve a problem, clarify a concept, and evaluate activities or extend the narrative. So sustained shared thinking involves a mutual engagement and is characterised by open-ended questioning, active listening, and collaborative dialogue. And the EPI study found that sustained shared thinking was a hallmark of effective early years settings and was strongly associated with better cognitive outcomes for children. The second finding from the EPI and EPSI projects was around adult qualifications and pedagogical practices. So the study revealed that settings with high qualified staff, particularly those with early years teaching qualifications, were more likely to engage in effective pedagogical practices, including sustained shared thinking, and that these settings provided richer learning environments and fostered better intellectual and social behaviour development in children. Now, the presence of trained teachers was linked to higher quality scores. They used ECAs and ITAs as part of this process, and it showed that children made more significant progress in their learning. And then the third aspect that was found in terms of high quality interactions with the EPI and EPSI project was around the integration of care and education. So EPI highlighted that integrated settings, so those combined care and education, tended to offer high quality provision, and that such settings were more effective in promoting positive child outcomes and emphasised the importance of a whole developmental approach to early childhood education. So there's some of the findings from that particular longitudinal study, or those longitudinal studies. Now, the strengths in terms of that research was how large and diverse the sample was. So over 3,000 children from 141 preschool settings across England formed part of that study, and it included a wide range of provider types, so nursery classes, playgroups, integrated centres and private nurseries, which ensured a diverse socio-economic and ethnic and regional diversity. Again, it was a longitudinal design, so children's progress was tracked over several years, which allowed researchers to assess long-term impact of early education and later outcomes, so thinking about their cognitive and social behaviour. It used different methods, and I think that's important as part of a research project. So it combined quantitative and qualitative research methods. And it supported conceptual contribution. So it introduced and validated the concept of sustained shared thinking as a marker of high quality interaction. And it also emphasised the importance, as I've said, about staff qualifications, pedagogy, as well as home learning. But we're not going to necessarily, that's not for this particular webinar. And it did have an impact on policy. So it influenced the development of early years foundation stage and increased the recognition of qualified early years teachers. Now, some of the limitations that were around this particular study is that it's context specific. It was carried out in the late 1990s and early 2000s, so some time ago. And I think from an early years perspective, we're in a very different place currently. I think all of us will be aware of that. It had the potential for observer bias. So some of the assessments that were made by the researchers were based on observational judgments, which could potentially be subjective. And I think that that's a theme in most of the research that we're sharing today. Some of the variables are complex. So the interactions between home environment, preschool type and teacher qualifications and child characteristics were complicated, and it made it difficult to isolate specific cause effects within relationships. It also has, it didn't necessarily explore digital technologies. So currently, you know, where we are today, most of us rely on, or we use digital platforms to help us to capture children's learning. And so that wasn't necessarily incorporated within it. In addition, children with special educational needs and disabilities were not a distinct focus. And I think many of us are working with such a diverse group of children currently, and that comes back down to the context specific. And there's definitely a need for more research on what high quality provision looks like for diverse learners, which comes back to one of your aims of earlier, and somebody really wanted to focus on that. And equally, I think thinking about children with EAL or children who are multilingual learners, and it didn't necessarily focus on culturally responsive pedagogy. And finally, while the study highlighted what high quality looked like, it said less about how to sustain or to scale quality across different settings over time. So just a really succinct kind of overview.
Yeah, so next we're going to look at, again, observational tools that could be really helpful in kind of thinking about adult style and interactions, and the high quality interactions that can help us to think about. It can help you again to think, does it fit with what you do? Does it suit your practice? So again, we're looking at the limitations and strengths of each. So one of them being sustained shared thinking and emotional well-being scale. So this measures the quality of interactions, has an emphasis on sustained shared thinking, emotional attunement and responsive pedagogy. And some of the key areas assessed are building trust and empathy, supporting language and communication. I think some of you mentioned some of these in the chats. Encouraging critical thinking and problem solving, extending learning through dialogue as well.
And the reference to the research is there.
Yes, it's all there. So if anything that's coming up, you think that really resonates with what I'm trying to achieve, with what I want to do, with our pedagogy, then you've got all the references to kind of go back to and maybe kind of trial that if you feel that's something that, yeah, would work. So strengths specifically focus on quality interactions, especially sustained shared thinking, encourages reflective practice and professional development, emphasizes emotional well-being, which is, you know, vital for learning, and it is based on research evidence from the EPI study and other studies. So some of the limitations is that it can be time consuming to administer and to score consistently, requires training for accuracy, and it may not capture some of the, you know, when we've got children with EAL, we've all got a diverse group of children, so it may not always capture all of that when it comes to all the different interactions, and it's very limited if we're trying to use with our babies and toddlers, so it's more sort of geared up towards the 3 to 5 year olds. And it doesn't incorporate children's perspectives directly either. So again, just things to think about: strengths, limitations, what would suit you best, what you think, you know, I could really try that. Next one is the Louvain scales. They were developed by Ferry-Lavers and his team. So these scales assess well-being, how comfortable, relaxed the child is. They assess involvement, and Ferry-Lavers, you know, he would often say that deep level learning happens when children are at their highest level of involvement and well-being. Some of you will be probably very familiar with these and use these in practice already. Again, supports practitioners to reflect on children's emotional states, which is really important. It can kind of start some of the conversations with parents as well, which I feel these are really good to use with parents in terms of thinking about their children and what's going on at home. How can we, you know, in terms of working together, I find these as a practitioner a really good way to support that communication with parents as well. Practitioners can create a more responsive and engaging environment. So Ferry-Lavers has very much done these scales geared up for practitioners to look and think about the environment, and is it right for the children? What is it that we're not getting right? So some of the strengths is highly intuitive and child focus, promotes reflective, emotionally attuned pedagogy, It is simple to use in everyday settings without intensive training. You know, these can quite easily be added to your standard observations if you're not doing that already. Limitations: subjective scoring can vary between observers without clear descriptors. It's not standardized for comparative research or benchmarking, and it doesn't assess specific pedagogical interactions or curriculum, so it's not specific really. And there's really limited guidance on what to do next based on your observations. So again, it's very much kind of open to, you know, your own interpretation really. When you gather this information, there's really not a lot, you know, what do we do next other than thinking about that child, your environment, and what is it that we need to think about.
I guess thinking for us that the way we've got around some of those more generic limitations is really to think collaboratively as a team.
Yeah.
And to consider how we are using the scales to think about where children are, and thinking collectively about what we do next to support children's learning and development, and specifically looking at those pedagogical interactions. So the limitations, you can get around the limitations of any of these aspects. It's just thinking about how
you're going to do it. Yeah. Then we've got the learning stories as well, which is a document that it does document children's learning journeys and interactions over time. It is through storytelling. So inspired by Reggio Emilia, New Zealand's Tifariki. So Margaret Carr and Wendy Lee, and you can go onto the link and check that. Wendy Lee has done a webinar for us where she talks about learning stories. If this is something, again, that you feel is fitting and could benefit your practice, you can look a bit more into it. So learning stories, strengths, it is rich in child voice because it is all about the child and the story that they're telling us as practitioners, and we are writing that. Celebrates children's interest, creativity and identity. Useful for building partnerships with families. Families usually love learning stories, and it's a really good way again to involve your families in what you're doing, what the children are doing. Some of the limitations is non-standardized, you can't really measure it. Requires skilled writing and interpretation. So again, it is about we are narrating what the children are doing, but it is very limited to what you think the children are doing. So it's open to interpretation really. And there's a risk of bias or selective storytelling. Can lack structure, analysis of interaction quality as well. So it's not really specific to look at the quality of the interaction, but I feel that if you are writing a learning story, then you will be deeply interested in that child. So that can only be a good thing for me anyway.
And you can't help but see the interaction. So I think you can definitely put the analysis of the interaction within the learning story. But again, it's the skill of the practitioner who's writing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So SHREC is an approach that's been developed by the London School of Research. It's embedded within the EEF evidence store. The link is here. So the SHREC approach provides practical advice on how to promote shared attention and back and forth conversations in the early years. And it's really focused on supporting communication. So SHREC stands for shared attention, response, expand, and conversation. So the research that sits behind the SHREC approach can be found in that link. So do think about that in terms of focusing on high quality interactions. Now, some of the strengths of the Shrek approach is it fits within the context of evidence-based research, and you can find all of that out in the previous link. It's simple and practical. It focuses on engagement and communication and supports language growth. Some of the limitations around Shrek is that it requires some training. It's not necessarily context specific, so it gives specific strategies for you to use, as opposed to reflecting on the strategies that you do use. It doesn't necessarily pick up on the non-verbal communication, so it limits the focus on gestures, facial expressions and pre-verbal cues. So thinking about the very young children, it doesn't necessarily link to curriculum planning and assessment, but that's the practitioners could definitely make those links themselves. And it doesn't necessarily offer specific strategies for children with additional needs. So there's a few of those research projects that aren't necessarily adapted to support children with SEND. So what does neuroscience say around high quality interactions? Well, I'm sure all of you have seen these quotes, but these are just some of the specific quotes that we've identified to frame this. That actually the human brain development is shaped by a process that begins early and continues into adulthood, but the foundations are built in the early years. So the importance of being in a relationship, so being in and alongside others, is really significant to support. So high quality interactions are really significant in supporting the developing child. And that actually high quality interactions provide a language-rich adult child, or it says that language-rich adult child interactions increase the quality and quantity of language and processing in the brain. And that, really importantly, warm, responsive caregiving supports the development of neural circuits involved in stress regulation. So if you're in a very safe and secure relationship, that actually it stimulates those aspects at the front of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, which just can support your executive functioning, then you can take in that process of learning. And I think, to the significance of a relationship and the importance of a secure relationship, we cannot underestimate and undervalue. So it's again thinking about how do you form those relationships with another. And then we just wanted to indicate to you some of the research that Ofsted has carried out. So Ofsted talk about frequent high quality interactions between adults and children are critical for quality provision from birth. And such interactions are fundamental to developing children's knowledge in the prime areas of learning, so communication, language, physical development, and PSED. And that the quality and quantity of interactions matter as they influence children's language development and their overall learning. And they write about the key components of high quality interactions. So the key components are an awareness of children's existing knowledge, the curriculum knowledge, how you plan incidental interactions as well as having planned interactions, and then really emphasizing communication and language. So those early interactions are crucial to support children's language development. And then these are some of the links that you can find in terms of where Ofsted write about high quality interactions. So within the Early Years Inspection Handbook, the Best Start in Life research, and then the most recent research around getting it right from the start. So how early years practitioners work with babies and toddlers. And that has many links back to the EPI and EPSI project that we identified earlier. So now we'd like to just spend some time thinking about how practitioner-led action research and how that can inform research as well. And we'll talk to you about the research that we've done here at Pen Green and how we came to our own pedagogic strategies. So for those of you who aren't familiar with practitioner-led action research is a form of self-reflective inquiry undertaken by participants in social situations in order to improve rationality and justice of their own practice. So when it's led by practitioners, it's practitioner action research. So it's about having an inquiry into your own practice, reflecting on that and thinking about the so what. So how can we incorporate some of that learning back into our practice in order to make a change in our practice? And that's the premise of action research, is it makes a change in practice. So in 1997, way back when, Pen Green invited parents to take part in a study, and that study was funded by the Teacher Training Agency, to considering our own pedagogic strategies that both workers and parents were using. Now, we began by introducing a group of parents to the work of the adult style, which was, for those of you who were involved in it, and I was involved in it as a practitioner many moons ago, the Effective Early Learning Project by Chris Pascal and Tony Bertram. And within the EEL project, Chris and Tony drew on the work of Carl Rogers, and Carl Rogers' work is amazing. If any of you have any opportunity to look at that, it really builds on the premise of relationships. And Rogers was thinking about how we interact with young children in order to facilitate their learning. So Rogers' work was mainly done as a counsellor, and he was thinking about when you work with adults, he talks about 3 different qualities: genuineness or realness, prizing acceptance and trust, and empathy or empathetic understanding. And Chris and Tony translated those qualities into adult behaviours to support children's learning. So they looked at stimulation or introducing new ideas or resources, allowing autonomy, so children to lead their own learning, and for adults to be sensitive or listening and watching in order to intervene appropriately. So in true Pen Green fashion, we considered these aspects, and we used the EEL framework with parents to think about what we were seeing in video sequences. So we would video parents and children interacting and practitioners and children interacting, and scrutinize those video sequences, and to consider what we could see. So could we see the 3 aspects that Chris and Tony had emphasized: so stimulation, autonomy, and sensitivity. And what we found is that the parents and the workers, as they met to look at the video material and began to reflect and analyse on those effective strategies, we developed our own framework for thinking about those strategies. And what we did is we developed our own, what we call pedagogic strategies. So the nuances from our context was what we then developed into our own pedagogic strategies.
So again, these were, because this was done alongside parents as well, this is what suited us, our context, our children, our families, our community. And as you can see, each strategy begins the adult with the word the adult, because it's really about the way we interact with children. So this forms part of our pedagogy and our approach. And I suppose this is the way we kind of look at high quality interactions. We use these as a kind of a guide for us. And it actually requires a lot of self-awareness as adults as well to be able to do this and to go through these. So watching, listening, to the child before intervening. It really stops you in your tracks and really makes you think about what that interaction you're going to have, what's that going to be like. You know, knowing about the children really well, their experiences. Are we showing them that we are interested when we are interacting with them? Because again, children will get the most out of an interaction if they know that you are interested in them, you are genuine. Children are very good at picking that up. Encouraging children to make choices, taking risks. So we began in 2005. We've identified 10 adult pedagogic strategies, and we use this as kind of, you know, in our daily practice to look at our role. And we use these with parents as well. So we like to introduce parents to these, and when we introduce them to what we, you know, our approach and how we work with children, we like to introduce parents to these as well. So then later on, we kind of continue to develop this, because again, we have to keep adapting and changing because things change over time. And we know, all of us know this, certainly having worked in early years for 20 years now, things have changed a lot and we have to continue to adapt our practice. So we then later on adapted our pedagogic strategies to consider our youngest children, our 0 to 2 children as well, which, as you can see, we've incorporated a few different things that will be more appropriate to the babies and toddlers. And then we've revised them again in 2013. Again, it was very much a collective approach. We've done this as a team. I was part of this as well. I wasn't part of the initial one, but I was part of this. I absolutely know this was, you know, this was done as a team. We were videoed as practitioners a lot and encouraged to reflect together. And we've kind of narrowed it down to 8 pedagogic strategies, which is what we currently do use in our practice.
Do you want to go through them?
Yeah. So we've identified the 8 main ones: subtle intervention with the adult, watching, listening to what the child is doing before intervening, linking experiences, being aware of the child's experience with other adults at home and in the setting. So again, you apply this to your planning, you know, not just when you're in the moment, but also to everything that you do in terms of your practice with the children. Acknowledging the adult, acknowledging the child's presence, emotions, capability by being physically close to them. We can include touch when appropriate, tuning into the children, to those facial expressions. I think, again, that's really important if you're thinking about developing communication and language in children. Working with the child's initiative and agency. The adult consider what the child is bringing to each interaction, checking their meaning, because again, we could just be talking and talking, because if we're just thinking that we're worried about introducing language, because again, that's a big push. It will be a very big push from Ofsted, and we can just be talking to children all the time because we think that's what we've got to do. But are we really taking the children into account, or they're bringing into those interactions as well? Adult learning, are we committed to learning alongside the children? Our attitudes are really important, the use of language and the use of body as well. So now we're going to, Fliss is going to talk to you about some of the strengths again, because it's important to look at the strengths and limitations of our own
research. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So some of the strengths of our pedagogical action research project is that it's very child-centred. As Flavia indicated, and I said earlier, the videos were not just of practitioners interacting with their children, but actually parents also engaging with their children. And as Flavia indicated, the pedagogic strategies are shared with parents as well, so parents can reflect on their own interactions with children. As part of the EPI study, identified how important home learning was, so actually supporting parents to think about their own interactions with their children is as important as us thinking about how we're supporting our own interactions with children and supporting their learning. It's exceedingly reflective process, working collaboratively, looking at pieces of video together, really dissecting that video and considering, what we're doing, how we're interacting, is particularly poignant in terms of this particular research project. And Penguin is a multidisciplinary team, so we have lots of different contexts that we draw from to support and inform our strategies. We use documentation and learning stories to communicate the children's learning with parents, so the high quality interactions and the pedagogy strategies inform part of that process. And as people are aware, Penguin is developed within a community-based ethos, so parents form every part of our organisation. Now, some of the limitations is it can be exceedingly intensive. So, there's lots of demands on practitioners. It's finding the time to look at the pieces of videos collaboratively with parents, with practitioners, scrutinising them, identifying, coding, theming, etc. So that's part of the limitation of this particular research project. And again, the scalability and transferability. We haven't scaled those pedagogic strategies up and done any formal research, but I think it's culturally specific to your settings. We have actually incorporated SEND within the project, but we haven't written that up. It's our newest development in this project to think about how we interact specifically with children who have special educational needs or disabilities, to add to our most recent pedagogic strategies. So there is a new version that will be coming out soon. But again, there's potential for subjectivity, so as there is with anything. But again, it's about the communication, working collaboratively with your team, and going back to our values and beliefs, so that social constructivist perspective, which I think is really important. So we've walked and whistle-stopped and ran through with bells and whistles, the different type of research projects that are out there that focus on high quality interactions. We really want you to think about, and we possibly won't necessarily have time to do that now, but for you maybe to start with thinking about what strategies do you use currently in your teams to support children's learning and development, and then reflect on their effectiveness. I think that's a really good starting point, alongside with your teams thinking about what your value base is. So going back to how do you believe children learn and develop, and what is the role of the adult? So spending some time with your teams to think about that. But for now, as part of a Stronger Practice Hub, we'd really like you to reflect on, is there a particular takeaway from today's session? Have you got any particular next steps? And are there any questions? So, and I'm just going to shoot forward and then come back to that. As a Stronger Practice Hub, we are thinking about developing some professional development to support practitioners to build their knowledge around high quality interactions. So a bit like we spoke about how we developed our own pedagogic strategies, we would like to facilitate the opportunity for practitioners to do that for themselves in their context. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please put that in the chat and let us know if that is something you're interested in. But going back to there, are there any questions?